Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. Of course it is vital that Australia maintains strong working relationships with our key allies, and there is no more important ally than the United States, our most important security partner, a critical economic partner, and of course our security relationships go back for more than 100 years. Our troops have fought together since 1918. We've been bound together by the ANZUS Treaty since shortly after World War II. Of course, more recently we've entered into the AUKUS arrangements, under which Australia will receive access to some of the most sensitive nuclear technology that the United States possesses. We're forming new arrangements, such as the Quad, the United States, Japan, India and Australia. Of course, the United States is a major source of inbound investment. It's a major export market for Australian businesses. So it is very important, Deputy Speaker, that the governments of these two nations work together closely and effectively. That is uncontestably in the interests of the Australian people. It is very important that there is mutual respect and trust between political leaders in both systems. What that means, Deputy Speaker, I think it's an uncontentious proposition, is that there's a requirement on the Australian government of the day to be professional and to be disciplined in the way that it approaches our relationship with the United States, as in the way it approaches our relationship with other key allies around the world. Let's be very clear on what our responsibilities are as political leaders in Australia. It's the job of the Australian government to deal with the government of the United States, the government that is chosen by the people of the United States. It is the right of the American people to choose their president. It is the obligation of the Australian government and of Australian political leaders to deal in a professional and respectful way with the government of the United States. And indeed we saw that behaviour being modelled and demonstrated by the previous coalition government under the first Trump administration. We saw that administration apply tariffs to steel and aluminium imports from around the world, as of course is the perfect entitlement of the democratically elected government of the United States. But then Liberal Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull successfully had Australia exempted from those arrangements. That was an example of a coalition government working constructively, professionally, engaging with the President and the administration in the United States. Now, you would have thought all of these are uncontentious propositions, so trite as to hardly be worth making. But sadly, Deputy Speaker, sadly, the evidence is clear that there are too many Labor politicians who do not accept or understand these statements, these principles that I've just articulated. Instead, time after time, they fall prey to the temptation to engage in performative virtue signalling directed at their lefty echo chamber to try and get more likes on Twitter or X. There's example after example, I'm very sorry to say, of senior figures in the Albanese Labor government indulging themselves by doing just this and going for that short-term sugar hit of approbation and approval from within their lefty echo chambers, but that is very much not in the interests of Australia and the Australian people. For example, when the Minister for Emissions Reduction and Energy published a book titled, in February 21, published a book titled On Charlatans. It hasn't been widely read, but I suspect it's been widely remaindered. But it does contain a description of the man who has just been elected as the President of the United States. It contains a description of him as narcissistic, a liar and the worst president in United States history. This is a current senior Labor politician engaging in remarkably irresponsible conduct which is not in the interests of the Australian people, not in the interest of Australia, not in the interests of a prudent and mutually respectful relationship. What about Wayne Swan? Swanee, the current Treasurer's mentor, surely we could have expected him to be more responsible in his approach. I'm sorry to say not. in a podcast on Radio National, so of course on the ABC he was naturally tempted to go for that virtue signalling and approval from the lefty echo chamber. He had this to say, quotes, "The rise of Donald Trump is what happens when rampant wealth and income inequality, which causes immense despair across working classes across the world, leads to such disillusionment with the political system that it pushes it in a neo-fascist direction." Now, I don't think that could be regarded as a responsible or prudent thing to say, or a thing which is in the interest of the Australian people, a thing which is in the national interest. Now, what is it that we've heard from other senior ministers in this government? The Minister for the Environment had this to say in 2016 about the then and current president, or the then presidential candidate, the just-elected President Donald Trump. She had this to say, "He's broken so many conventions. I think it's fair enough for us to say as Australians, to say we are deeply concerned about the security concerns his candidacy raises." Again, falling prey to the temptation to appeal to that lefty echo chamber rather than thinking in a sober and responsible way, what is the thing that I should be saying as a senior Australian politician in our national interest? What about the Prime Minister's senior press secretary, formerly the Guardian journalist Murpharoo? Now, what has she had to say about President Trump? She says it was fascinating to be with Trump in the Oval Office. He had a simple objective: stonewall, redirect and destabilise the room. Again, you could not say that now source of senior advice to the Prime Minister is somebody who was carefully calibrating her words in the interest of maintaining a mutually respectful relationship with the United States. Now, of course, what is it that the Assistant Treasurer had to say? He had to say one of his many missteps in November 2016. He said, quotes, "We've seen a lot of people hoping like hell that there's going to be a massive disconnect between what Donald Trump campaigned as and what he's going to govern as." So again, a self-indulgent piece of commentary appealing to the lefty echo chamber. Now, you would hope, of course, that our Prime Minister, the man who holds this august office, would take a more responsible position. You would hope that. But unfortunately, at Splendour in the Grass, again falling prey to the temptation to appeal to the crowd. He's probably in one of his T-shirts.
Free tickets. A lot of fun. He must have had free tickets.
Probably trying hard to convince the 18-year-olds that he was one of them.
Did he declare the gift?
And in a forum, he said, he was very critical. He was very critical. In fact, he used the words.
How can he deal with it?
Well, so he was asked. He was asked.
How about we just quit? Sorry, Manager for Opposition. If the member for Petrie and the Assistant Minister could please stop the interjections. I'm really struggling to hear. I've been very gracious in allowing them for this long, but I don't want to hear them anymore.
It is disappointing to have to report that the current Prime Minister of Australia, in a public forum, said of the man who's just been elected as the President of the United States, and I'm going to use a euphemism here because we are in the Parliament of Australia, he scares the S out of me, is what our current Prime Minister said. This is the same Prime Minister who just before question time today said that he'd made it a priority to build trust and respect with other leaders. That's what he said. But of course, surely we can rely upon our ambassador in the United States, Kay Rudd, to sort it all out, because he knows everything. The unfortunate truth is that Kay Rudd was described by the man who's just become President of the United States in an interview as, quotes, not the brightest bulb, and, quotes, if he's at all hostile, he will not be there long. The fact is, it is vital that we maintain a respectful and trust-based relationship with our most important security partner. Sadly, senior politicians in this Albanese Labor government, from the Prime Minister down, have failed dismally.